answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may dine with him." On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." As we turn to prayer, let us remember Jesus' words.
In John's Gospel, John chapter 11. And that's on page 1077. And before I start, let me pray for myself and for all of us as we come to God's word. Let me pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you that you have spoken and you continue to speak through your word. Thank you that you have given us hearts and minds that can know you and understand. Thank you that you created us for relationship. We pray that you would grow us in that relationship this morning as we hear your word. In your name's sake. Amen. Love changes everything. All you need is love. Or how about the power of love? The positive person in you really wants to believe the lyrics of the songs, especially when you're carried along by that catchy tune or that powerful melody. And I guess maybe you do believe them for as long as the music continues. But when the music stops and there's silence, I guess each one of us can very quickly remember the time when love let us down. When my love let someone else down. So Huey Lewis and the News, when they sang the song The Power of Love, they brought in some realism and a little bit of hesitation. They talk about it being strong and it being sudden, but also it's cruel sometimes. But it might just save your life. That's the power of love. There you have it. Love is not everything it should be. And in any sentence about what love can do, you've got to put the word might in there. I have mixed feelings when I see appeals for charity donations. They sometimes seem to promise too much. When we set up our own charity in Lebanon, we knew that we only changed the lives of some of the children some of the time. And there was no U2 and B.B. King, When Love Comes to Town. Bono speaks of the weakness of our love, but also of a love that seems to come to town from outside. A love that is apart from us, that can change us, and can even rescue us. So he sings, when love comes to town, I'm going to catch that train. When love comes to town, I'm going to catch that flame. Maybe I was wrong to ever let you down, but I did what I did before love came to town. I was a sailor, I was lost at sea, I was under the waves before love rescued me. And that's what we have in today's passage today. Love, with a capital L, comes to town. Or to a village, actually, a village Bethany just outside of Jerusalem. God is love. So what happens when God walks into a town? Last week we took a break from this series because of our away day. So it was 2 weeks ago that we were last in John. So let me just remind us where we were last time. The crowds were getting frustrated with Jesus, and they asked him the question, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. And then we heard at the end of today's reading, in verse 27, Martha, the sister of Lazarus, she said this. She said, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. She believes that love, with a capital L, has walked into her town. And this love that has walked into town is more than our sentimental or well-meaning love. This is the love of Jesus. And so we're going to see this morning how the love of Jesus shows purpose, feels pain, but ultimately has power. So we start with the love of Jesus showing purpose. If you look at those first 6 verses in John chapter 11, you'll see that the word sick or sickness is in every single verse except for verse 5. And yet at the same time it's repeated in verse 3 and verse 5 that Jesus loved the sick man Lazarus, and he loved his sisters Mary and Martha. And of course one of the most common objections to Christianity is, how can a God of love allow so much pain and suffering in the world? Mary and Martha, they love Jesus, they respect him, so they're reluctant to come at Jesus with quite such a blunt accusation. But look what they say in verse 3. Lord, the one you love is sick. All of us, when someone we love is sick, things aren't right. This is not the way it should be. Surely, God, this is not the way you want it to be. So we say, God, the one you love is sick. And like Mary and Martha, the assumption is, well, God, you're going to know what to do. You're going to know what to do to put this right. But when Jesus doesn't do what they expect, when he allows Lazarus to die, Martha is a bit more direct If there is no God, then there is no need to ask the question why. There's no point in asking the question why. Suffering, it just is. Why should there be any reason if there is nothing beyond this world we can see and know? If you don't believe in God, then you just cross your fingers and hope you dodge that bullet, hope you avoid that car crash, that cancer, that divorce. But for any of us who trust God, well, that question why is not just a question that's born out of our faith. It's a question that God puts in the Bible. God gives voice to our questions. These questions are written for us by God. He gives voice to the question why. He gives us permission, even if we lack the courage, to say it to him. Of course, the Bible doesn't give us complete answers to that question. We don't get all the reasons why. But then I don't think that even if we were given the reasons why, our finite minds would have the capacity to understand the interwoven and interconnected suffering of 8 billion people. Not like God does. But I believe that God gives us something far better than the answers. He gives us hope. Not a superstitious, cross your fingers and hope things get better, but a real, historically rooted hope in the Lord Jesus Christ. Because you see, if Jesus had healed Lazarus, he was going to get sick again. And he did eventually die. Which means that healing is not the best thing that Jesus can give to Lazarus, but hope is. Hope beyond this world of sickness, suffering, and death. That's the purpose of the love of Jesus, to give us hope. So after we're told in verse 5 that Jesus loved these siblings, verse 6 begins with the word so. He loves them, so. What does love choose to do when he has the power to heal? So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. In order to give us real hope, Jesus must remove from us every other hope. You see, even if Jesus had left immediately that he heard this news, he was still going to be 2 days late. He still would have arrived after his journey 2 days after Lazarus had died. So why does he wait 2 more days? So that he's then 4 days late. What's the difference? According to their understanding then, that the soul would hover around the dead body for a few days after death, seeking a way back in. But apparently they believe that after 4 days, that was it. The soul has departed. There is no further hope that life is going to return to that body. So Jesus wanted to remove all hope, any other hope, so that they would hope in him alone. And I believe he needs to do the same for us. For there to be hope, the kind of hope that we can bet our lives on, Jesus says we need to see 2 things. We need to see God's glory, that's his goodness and his greatness, and we need to know that Jesus can be trusted. God's glory and believing both good and great. And the goodness and greatness of this world is an extension of his goodness and greatness. And you can't have one without the other. You can't have a good and great creation without a good and great creator. And yet, starting with Adam and Eve, we've neither treasured his greatness nor have we trusted his goodness. Which means we do still see a shadow of his goodness and greatness in the world. We see that. But we see it spoiled like a park that's been scattered with litter. So that's why Jesus waits. He waits because for there to be any satisfactory answer to the problem of suffering, any chance that this fallen and cursed world can be redeemed and restored, we need to know that there is a good and great creator and that we can trust him. And that's the hope that Jesus wants to show. That's the reason that he waits. But hope, by its very definition, means we can wait. While we wait, the pain continues. We need to know more than that the love of God just has a purpose. We need to know that the love of Jesus feels pain. The love of Jesus made him wait, but it didn't make him stay away. He's warned by his disciples that if he goes back there, his life is at risk. The last time he was in that place, they threatened to stone him. So his love makes him wait, but his love doesn't keep him from coming to town. And when Jesus does arrive in town, Mary repeats her sister's implied accusation in verse 32. Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. She's wondering, okay, if this is how love responds to suffering, by simply waiting and watching. But then we read in verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And at that point, John writes, Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. If God does not weep with us in our suffering, then no amount of rational thinking or good theology should satisfy us or give us any comfort. Would we want a God who is dry-eyed in the face of genocide? Would we want a God who simply shrugs his shoulders when we ask him, why? Why did you let this happen? Would we want to share an eternity with a God who feels nothing of our pain? He simply sends us a message from heaven, trust and wait. Trust and wait. Only in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ do we have God taking on human form and not just coming to sympathize with us in our pain, not just even to empathize, but to actually feel our pain. Living in a world of pain, we should not believe in a God who does not feel pain. A world where babies die young, where boys are forced to fight in wars, where girls are abused. We lament suffering, we complain, we question God's goodness and his sovereignty, and sometimes as you hear yourself or hear someone else complaining, you wonder, do we actually think that we care more than God about this? We might make our donation to charity, we might volunteer one day a week, we might even go to another country and educate refugees. Do we care enough to swap places? Am I willing to make my comfort theirs and their suffering mine? That's what God has done, isn't it? In Jesus. Just as the threat of death didn't keep him away from going to Bethany, to Lazarus, so also the threat of death didn't keep him from coming from heaven to earth. He came to die. Not as a helpless victim like us, deal with death. Jesus has come to completely destroy death. We try and fight death, don't we? We have our health foods and our exercise regimes and the latest fad. We're desperately pushing back on death, but it's not a fair fight. We're puny in the face of death. So if we can't beat it, we sentimentalize it. We talk of someone just slipping out of the room. Or at a funeral where people are there who've never thought of God all their lives. They suddenly start saying that, of course, their deceased loved one is smiling down from above, keeping a seat warm for us up there. Jesus isn't sentimental in the face of death. He is outraged at this impostor that has been brought into this world by our mutiny against God's good government. But why would he weep? Why would he weep if he knows what he's going to do? If he knows he's about to raise Lazarus, why weep? Because he's not just indignant, he is not just outraged, but he is grieved. He is grieved by what our Maker has done to the world he created. We fight death, we fail, we sentimentalize it, we also rationalize death. Steve Jobs said this: probably death is the best invention of life. He said it's life's change agent. It clears out the old and makes way for the new. Like autumn, the dead leaves fall, and we know that spring is coming. Well, that's all well and good if you're in the springtime of your life, but if you're in the autumn or the winter, it's not very reassuring. You can only see autumn as beautiful if you have the hope of spring. And only Jesus offers that to human beings. That spring will follow the death of winter. Jesus came to earth to redeem it from that curse of sin that has brought in this pain and suffering. He has come to go head to head with death in the greatest showdown of the whole history of the world. And so as he walks into town in Bethany, his raising of Lazarus is just the trailer for the main feature film, which will be him, in a few days' time, rising from the dead himself. Because when God comes to town, it has power. Look with me at verse 38. Verse 38. Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odour, for he has been there 4 days. Imagine being there. Imagine being one of those volunteered to roll back that stone. You'd be profoundly uncomfortable at the thought of disturbing the dead. You'd be bracing yourself for the smell. You would know that what you would see in there would not be Lazarus as he was, but Lazarus what he's become in death. But Jesus says, verse 40, did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Jesus waited to show the purpose of his love. He wanted them, he wanted us to have hope, a sure hope, in the face of suffering and death. Healing would not be enough. It wouldn't be enough 40 books, she's travelled the world to share the hope of Christ. She is grateful to Jesus for what Jesus has done in her and through her, but still her hope is not for healing now, but for a new body after death. Listen to what she says. I still can hardly believe it. I, with shriveled bent fingers, atrophied muscles, gnarled knees, and no feeling from the shoulder down, will one day have a new body, light, bright, and clothed with righteousness. No other religion, no other philosophy promises new bodies, hearts, and minds. Only in the gospel of Christ do hurting people find such incredible hope. When love came to town in Jesus, his purpose was to give hope, but also to be real about the presence of suffering and pain. And so he feels our pain and weeps with us. But his love is not just sentimental well-meaning. His love has power. Because in love, he was willing to tackle the root cause of the problem, our sin, our mutiny against his good covenant. To take that sin to the cross, and so to destroy death. In that U2 song that I mentioned at the beginning, When Love Comes to Town, Bono in the song recognises that he held personally responsibility for the crucifixion of Jesus. So he says this, I was there when they crucified my Lord. I held the scabbard when the soldier drew his sword. I threw the dice when they pierced his side. But then he says, but I've seen love conquer the great divide. Right at the beginning of this series in John 3, we had Nicodemus going to meet Jesus at night, and Jesus promises him new birth. Well, that new birth into a new life, that is the beginning of the resurrection that Jesus made possible by his own death and resurrection. A resurrection that will be consummated at death. What does Jesus say in verse 11? He says, our friend Lazarus is asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. Isn't that a wonderful verse for any who have chosen to submit to Jesus as both Lord and Saviour? He calls us friend. And he says that when you die, the next thing you hear will be his voice calling you to rise. It's not your hope, and you would like that to be your hope. And please talk to someone before you leave this morning. Let me close in prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we confess we don't understand so much. We are angry and hurt by so much. But we know that your love, your care is greater than ours. We know your wisdom is beyond all understanding. So whilst we find it hard, we ask you to grow our faith in you. Give us a stronger hope that we would know your love, how you feel our pain, that we would be your people